with the meal, I'm like, I always feel so much better, right? So, but again, it changes person to person.
It does, yeah.
Right.
What do you say about certain kind of diets? So some people are vegan, vegetarian, animal based, or carnivore, and there's also other diets like paleo diet or
And
Mediterranean diet, and all these other diets.
stuff,
So there's dietary choices and then specific diets. So are there some of those that are bad, good, whatever?
Like I said, it's the same thing that I have. Right. If you really want to do something, go nuts. There's health benefits to all of them to some degree, and if someone wants to do it, no problem, go for it. But to think that it's the all end all, you're just wrong. That's just being blunt. To think that you can't ever have carbohydrates, or that you can't ever eat meat, or if you can't ever eat vegetables or fruits, you're just wrong. First off, we think about it Islamically. All right, like for us, like we're getting our teachings, from the Prophet ﷺ, and he ate meat. He had carbohydrates in his diet. He had vegetables in his diet. He had fruits in his diet, right? He did not tell us to cut out any of that stuff. He told us don't indulge, right?
That's right.
Don't indulge,
yeah.
Right? So eat, just don't indulge. But don't think that everything, and then people are like, oh, but the nutrients aren't the same, and blah, blah, and those other stuff like this. First off, what nutrients, what vitamins and stuff are you getting from meat? Or vice versa, right? You're not going to get sufficient protein from vegetables. They're like, if you're a vegan, it's very, very difficult for you to be able to keep it. Like, for example, there's that really annoying mockumentary, I call it, not even a documentary, that came on Netflix, Game Changer.
Yeah.
Right? Absolute nonsense, right? And it's been debunked and it's been absolutely torn apart within the health world. Just because for its, they talked about different athletes, right? I'm like, fine. I think they mentioned like 6 different athletes. Okay, cool, not a problem. Do you know the millions that we can name that all eat meat that dominate significantly more than every single one of those athletes they mentioned?
That's right.
Right? Like they mentioned Nate Diaz, for example, right? He is like, oh, he's a vegetarian. But the part they missed out, he's not a vegetarian when he's in fight camp. So when he's preparing for a fight, he adds fish to his diet to make sure he has the strength to keep doing what he needs to do.
That's crazy.
Right? So I'm like, wait, you guys missed the most important part. He said he eats fish a significant amount during fight camp. Like, why didn't you guys mention that part? Right? And then they're going on about all these different athletes that are like, I'm like, and then they're talking about, I think there's something about like the world's a powerlifter or something like that. I'm like, the world's strongest man. One of them, his name is Hopper. He's Canadian actually, from Barrie. I'm like, he eats meat. He's like all these, like you look at what's his name, Thor Borgnson or whatever.
Yeah.
I'm like, mountain. I'm like, literally he eats mountains of animals. No, I'm like, again, nothing against being a vegan or vegetarian. If you want to do that, okay, fine, okay, all the power to you. But to turn around and look down at someone else as if they're not doing something right, and that's the problem, right? We go into like these tribes. Right, almost cults, right? Because I have some friends who are like carnivore, that went to a carnivore route, and exactly the same thing. I'm like, first off, I'm like, you're following these guys on social media that flip flop, bake it back and forth. Like you have one, I don't want to mention his name, but you had one individual who was like, he was hardcore no carbs, then he switched to, okay, carbs are bad, but then he started off a vegetarian. He started as hardcore vegetarian. Then he said, actually no, vegetables are bad with no carbs. Then he's like, well, wait, we can have meat. And he's written books on all of these things. Then because that's the direction the trend was going. And then he cut out all vegetables and he's like, no carbs, just carnivore. Now, recently he came out and he's like, wait, never mind. You can have certain carbs. You can have fruits and honey.
Paul Saladino?
Right? It's like, one thing is, there's nothing wrong with changing your opinion, right? And be like, listen, I learned more. I understood more now. That's fine. The part that irks me about a lot of these guys out there is that they start to vilify those that are against their argument, right? Yeah. So say I'm wrong. Okay, fine. Yeah. There is one way, no problem. But I'm not vilifying you doing anything else. I'm telling you, there's a good chance I might not.
Specifically, it has changed that because he got a lot of flack for it. He started dissing all vegetables, basically.
He made a lot of money doing it too.
He did, and then he got called out quite a bit because a lot of people are thriving. But now what he says is, if you're thriving eating X, Y, Z vegetable, keep doing it. For me, it doesn't work.
But that took him after he made...
Yes, exactly.
Right? But that's what I mean. It's one thing, if right off the bat, he's like, listen, I'm vegetarian, you guys can do... If you took that approach right off the beginning, no problem. Yeah. Right? For me, that credibility is gone just because it's like, okay, wait, where was that all to begin with? right? Why like, but that's for us. It just comes after Adin, right? Having the humbleness, right? I by no means am saying that I know everything and the all end all or anything, right? But I'm like, I'm okay with learning and understanding what I don't know, right? I don't know what I don't know, right? It is what it is.
Some of them are just entertainment, like Liver King.
Oh yeah,
just pure entertainment.
But the funniest was people were surprised that he's not. I'm like, really? What, like, yeah. I'm like. And
you can't look like that. He was just dieting. There's no.
And the thing is, like,
hell.
okay, fine. Say you can look like that, but I'm like, his workouts were horrible. Everything was just like, none of this makes any sense, right? It was just everything as a whole, right? Like, even when you look at steroids, it's just so funny because, like, you know, people like assume even with steroids that you'll take it and you'll just automatically gain all this muscle and so forth too. Like, there's a huge epidemic with even with like steroids and stuff, especially within those who are younger, thinking that they can just take stuff and just get jacked. Don't realize, like, you see people all the time now, especially in gyms, most average body, not against that, right? But like in the sense where it's like a person who works out, right? Regular looking person who works out, you know, decent arms, you know, chest, shoulders, you know, so forth. Nothing like Instagram worthy in that sense, right? But like, all right, you look like you work out. And if you find out later it's like person on steroids, I'm like, for that?
Are you serious?
All the time. Yeah, there's so many.
So the amount of people that are taking it is more than
it's
you'd
a multi-billion-dollar industry. Yeah. You're not seeing that many people walking around that are absolutely shredded.
Because I see people at the gym sometimes, and they're like young too. Some of them will be young, like in their 20s, and they're like absolutely jacked. I'm like, there's no way this guy got like
so
that.
One thing I'll say is genetics is a thing.
It is a thing,
right?
Yeah.
I remember I had one client come in once when I was working at the commercial gym, and it was so interesting because like this guy comes in and he's like, bro, I've never worked out in my life. I'm like, all right, no problem. He's like, I'm here alone. You know, I just came here a few years ago and I've never worked out a day in my life. I'm like, all right, not a problem. What do you do? He's like, I work. He's like, he has some factory job, lifting boxes, nothing heavy or anything like that. It's fairly active, but nothing too crazy. And he's like, I'm like, all right, let's go. Everything I put him through, this thing was the easiest thing in the world. I'm like, bro, there's no way that you've never done anything. He's like, I swear to you, I've never done anything. And just, you can tell he was a genetic freak. Like, I'm like, all right, let's go on the treadmill. He had boots on. And this guy, 20, 30 minutes, I come back. I'm like, bro, you're still running? And at a fast pace with a high incline. I'm like, yo, I'm like, listen, you need to like take this thing seriously. Like, you could really do something in this, right? And but that's the thing. Some are just genetically gifted, right? So again, I don't want to accuse anyone either, right? So a lot of them, like some genetically gifted. But yeah, it's huge. Like from SARMs to peptides to steroids to all this stuff. And what people don't understand is like, you have to know how to work out, right? You can take all the steroids in the world. You might put on some muscle, but you have to know how to work out. You have to know how to eat. The vast majority of people don't know the first two things of that. Yeah. But then you have to know how to take steroids as well. For sure. Right? There's a whole off-cycle part to it. There's all these supplements that you have to take in order for you to manage like your kidney and all this other stuff. Yeah. You know, like when people ask us, like, you ever thought about it? I'm like, bro, you understand the headache that it is? I'm like, I got 3 kids. I'm like, I got enough to stress about. Oh, yeah. I'm like, I don't want to have to worry about, how I take all those supplements to make sure my kidneys don't shut off. I'm like, oh, there's a potential chance even if I do take this, I'm like, it can cut some time off my life. I'm like, so I can have, slightly less strength and slightly less physique or any of that stuff, but still have a better chance of living longer. I'm like, I'm good. I'm like, what is the purpose of it? Like, what am I trying to obtain? Who am I trying to impress? Like, I'm already married. Makes sense. That part.
So I wanted to ask about muscle growth specifically a little bit as we come towards the end is a lot of guys are interested in gaining muscle mass, hypertrophy. So what are some of the how should one get started? How can we start putting on some muscle mass?
So the 2 ways that you gain muscle is strength training, so resistance. Right. Mm-hmm. And then the second, well, not that 1 and 2, but the second thing is protein intake, right? Sufficient protein intake. So those are 2 ways. Any one of those 2 things missing, you're going to be thinking, right? Making sure that you're adding sufficient volume plays a factor as well. So regardless of how you want to split up your workouts, right? So if you want to follow bodybuilding, if that's your goal, if you want to follow the bro splits that you want to do, no problem. If you want to do, I prefer upper lower. If you're going 4 times, I'm like, hey, upper lower, because you're hitting multiple muscle groups multiple times in a week. Mm-hmm. And same thing with your lower body as well. And it's better, especially for athletes as well, especially if you're playing like sports
push-pull
and stuff.
I go towards push-pull.
Push-pull legs, yeah, that's fine too, right? Mm-hmm. But adding in some elements of legs on your pull days especially as well, right? So you're gonna add, that's fine too, right? But again, if you're only going 3 times in a week, so if you're going 3 times a week, I prefer full body workouts, mm-hmm. right? Go full body, because then you're hitting multiple muscle groups 3 times in a week. you know, if you're doing 4, then you could do 2 and 2, right? And then as you get better, the one thing is like you'll have arguments towards getting to failure